Okay, we're into the second album of the year from King Giz, and honestly, at this point, I feel as though they're slacking. Last year we had 4 or 5 records from them. The year before that, I think we had just as many. So the fact that we're only getting 2 from King Giz at the moment for 2022, or I guess 2023, we're in 2023, is a little bit of a, a little bit of a slouch here. But hey, the 2 albums that dropped this year couldn't be any more different. So I'm okay with that. Let's dive in and talk about it. The Silver Chord from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. So King Giz is they're a chameleon, really. I think a lot of people are calling them a chameleon band. I feel as though they got their start more as a psych garage band from Australia. Their first handful of records were very just straight up psych rock, and then they slowly started to develop this kind of cult following where each record they put out was almost an entire genre, and they've touched everything from progressive rock, sludge metal, slash metal, all the way to hip hop and kind of psychedelic kind of rock-ish, very singer-songwriter moments, all the way into, this is kind of one of the new styles that they've been flirting with, which is kind of a electronic techno house, almost krautrock kind of a style on here. And what I really appreciate, and again, King Giz are known to push the boundaries and break the mold, is putting out this album in a kind of 2 versions. You kind of have the standard edition, which is just under a half hour worth of music with 7 tracks on it. The longest track being about 4 minutes and 25 seconds, to an extended mix of the album where it's the same sequence of songs, but the shortest one at that point is 10 minutes and 18 seconds. So they're really blown out in that sense, and I kind of like that. I kind of like that we're given 2 versions of this album. So I'm going to kind of talk about each album independently, but then how they work together kind of as we go through the actual track lengths here. Before I get into that, I also like how this is essential a foil to the last album they put out, which was the Petrodraconic Apocalypse, which was their second thrash metal album, following off the heels of the 2019 album of Infest the Rat's Nest. Again, both are very environmental activist kind of settings and themes, all set to the backdrop of this thrash metal aspects. And I really love the Petrodraconic Apocalypse. I thought it was one of their strongest outfits. It's definitely their strongest metal forward album. And I just love the tale and the story that is told and woven throughout. This album doesn't really have that same kind of narrative flow. It's much more of just a techno, dance, house, as I mentioned, almost like a krautrock feel to it as well. And it really is just kind of a vibe. The overall feeling of this album is a vibe. And the first, the standard edition, the standard mix of this album really does just kind of touch the tops of the waves on this. And it feels as if you're just kind of gracing the ocean top, because each track really does flow right into the next. It's kind of this continuous flow towards it, and because each track is so short, you're only really given a quick taste. It's almost as if you're at a social gathering and there's just a little figure nibbles. You go and you try a little bit here, you try a little bit there. You're always kind of munching on something, but the flavor is constantly changing. It's always constantly developing. And sometimes it's quite delicious and quite good. Within the standard edition, one of my favorite tracks is the title track of Silver Chord. It's reminding me of some of the more pastel flavors that we would get from Paper Mache Dream Balloon or sketches from East Brunswick, where it's just very minstrel. It's just very airy. As I mentioned, it's just the vibe that's going on with it. And same with tracks like the Swan Song, which again is just very airy, very light. There's not this big oomph that we have on it. It's kind of also reminded me of some of the more pastel moments on Butterfly 3000 and the remix of 3001. And there's also a few tracks on here that's a little bit more on the challenging side. And challenging in terms of like, it's a little bit more layered to it. There's a lot going on. And in the very short sequences that we get, like very, very short, it's just like it's here and then it's gone. It's like, wait, no, come back. I want to sink my teeth a little bit more into that. Like Set, which has a very interesting rap line throughout it. And it's reminding me of some of the things that we heard from like last year's Gatherum Omnium. Something like that, the big double disc album that they put out, and on tracks like Changes. And on here with Gilgamesh, it's getting little callbacks from Petro Draconic. We've got this kind of feel, and I keep hearing, like, just in the wings, some callbacks to that album, both thematically in the music and lyrically in the vocals that are coming through as well. So if those are just like the little nibbles, then you can choose from the nibbles to go right into the full course. And this is where I both love and find it a little bit of a challenge when we get to the extended mix, because Thea, the shortest track on the album, the opening track, which I think was even less than 3 minutes. Well, it's 3.5 minutes, but it's the shortest track off the album by far. And on the extended mix, it goes into 20 minutes. So this is where we're entering more of like the house, the krautrock, the trans rock kind of aspect, where it's very hypnotic. And, they're really, really stretching out. And there are moments on this, specifically on Thea, but also on other tracks like the Silver Chord, which on the standard mix is my favorite. But on here, it just feels like Bilbo saying on The Fellowship of the Ring, where he feels like he's a bit of dough that's been scraped too thin. And there are moments on here that kind of feel that. They feel a little bit stretched too thin for what they're doing, but I still enjoy that kind of transient, very hypnotic states of these tracks. I love how they're just really like drawn out and essentially just kind of like this big jam session between these guys in a very electronic setting. Like we're void of guitar licks, we're kind of void of more standard music, or instruments. We're really at the command of the synth, the keyboards, and, programming in that sense. In some cases, I really appreciate and I like that. And coming from a progressive rock background such as myself, and I love these more atmospheric, crowdy items, like I'm getting flavors of like the Tangerine Dreams or items like that. I can really appreciate these moments on here, but like... right from like the title, like the actual front covers into the actual music, I feel like they're channeling Kraftwerk's like really, really heavily on this. They have the rose tinted glasses and everything on it. But I also feel, unlike the standard mix, it's a good album from start to finish. I feel like with the extended mix, it makes for a little bit more of a choppy experience, because really you're just going from track to track to track much more in isolation than how it works with the album overall. Because I really love on the standard mix how each track really does heighten and elevate the track that came before and the track that's coming afterwards, and how it works within the context of the album itself. The extended mixes only really work in isolation. Once they're put down on a full album, they don't jive or work quite as well. It's kind of like, the appetizers in the standard mix with having to sit down to a roast beef dinner that's paired with spaghetti, that's paired with stew, that's paired with soup, that's paired with like a dumpling dinner, that's paired with like all these very contrasting and very like intense flavors, where if I'm at a potluck, just little tastes here and there create a very delicious and very satisfying meal. But when I sit down and just have a plate of meatballs, or I just have a plate of like piggies in a blanket, I'm like, whoa, that's a little too much, especially when I finish my piggies in a blanket. I don't want to go straight into a full bowl of meatballs, So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating in the extended mix, but if I'm able to put on the extended mix and just kind of tune out and just let the music fold over me in the vibe that it's setting, it's much more of an enjoyable album, but one that I can't really engage with all that much, because then I'll start to feel frustrated. Whereas in the standard mix, it's much easier to fall into. It's much easier to really connect and really vibe with. So Yeah, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting one because on the face of it, I enjoyed this one a lot more than Petro Draconic. Even though I would say that Petro Draconic is probably the stronger album, this is the one that I've been listening to far more. And I've actually been listening to this album more than quite a number of King Gizz's previous releases. So yeah, even with its flaws and blemishes, I still ended up loving this album and one that I've come back to. My only gripe is that when I ordered this album, you know, because I pre-ordered this one, I just pre-ordered the extended mix and I thought the extended mix came with the standard album and it did not. So now I'm going to have to find the standard mix somehow so I can have both of them in my collection. It's just like another way of getting my money. But yeah, that's a little bit besides the point. What I will say, my final rating for the Silver Cord is... The Silver Cord from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard is one I would absolutely pick up in physical format. Again, if you're a King Giz fan, if you're a King Giz head, you've already listened to this. You've already enjoyed this one. If you're new to the band, this will probably be an odd one. This wouldn't be necessarily where I start with the band because, again, each album is just so different. But if you're into krautrock, if you're into house, if you're into more electronic and experimental stuff on that case, you're probably really going to enjoy this one. As I mentioned, this album is definitely a vibe, and if you connect with the vibe, you're going to love it. If you're not connecting with the vibe, you might find this one a little bit frustrating. But that's what I've got for the Silver Cord. What do you guys think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? How does it compare to the King Gizzard discography? Where would you slot it in their like tier lists or whatnot? Yeah, what do you think their next album is going to be? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the next record turns out to be like a hip hop or like a 90s rap album, you know, kind of in the style of like a Beastie Boys or something like that. But yeah, so anyway, that's it for me for the Silver Cord from King Giz. Thank you guys all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.